Buying a new home is a very exciting time for most. You think about the way you want the space to look, location, and all the memories you will create. But it's important to remember that purchasing real estate is likely the largest transaction of your lifetime. It's important to have the right team handling your contracts and the legal end so you can truly enjoy the process. Today, we are getting down to business with our local real estate attorney and friend, attorney David Weir. Welcome, my friend.
Good morning, John.
Nice to have you, bud.
Thank you for having me.
All right, awesome. So Dave, why don't we start out? Why don't you tell us what buyers and sellers look for when they sit down with you in a transaction, when you finally receive a contract?
Okay, well, we make a point of reviewing the contract in detail. The contract itself is the rules for the transaction. So we must explain the rules to the people right up front so everybody knows what their expectations and what their obligations are.
What are some of the questions that you actually would discuss during the consultation process when a client sits down with you for the very first time?
Well, it depends on what hat I'm wearing. And what I mean by that is whether I'm representing a seller or I'm representing a buyer. One of the biggest things that I find that we must discuss with people when they're purchasing a home, especially when it's a couple or 3 or 4 people buying a home together, is how that title is going to be held. And what I mean by that is that in New York State, there's 3 distinct ways to hold title to property. One is a married couple, okay, which means that in the event I were to pass away during my life, then my spouse would take that house free and clear of all liens, encumbrances, or anything. There's also joint tenants with rights of survivorship, which means that you and I can buy a house together and hold that title as joint tenants. And if I were to pass away, you would acquire that title, but you're going to acquire it with the liens that I have. And also there's tenants in common, which means that if either one of us were to die, then our will would determine where our portion of the property goes. And I find this is very important to set up right at the beginning so everybody understands what's going to happen after the closing.
What are some of the risks that clients take when they want to sell their home on their own and not utilizing the services of a professional real estate agent?
I've been practicing for 25 years and I have never seen more for sale by owners than the last 2 years. I had a very nice young lady selling her home. She wanted to sell it to her tenants. And after 3 months, that tenant could not acquire a mortgage. At the very beginning, I said to her, I think you're underselling this. I think this house is worth more than this. She insisted that that was the value. She ended up contracting with a real estate agent to sell the house and sold that house for $80,000 more than she was selling to the tenant. So it is very important that you understand the value of your property. And it is not an attorney's role to tell you what that value of the property is. That's a real estate agent's job. And if you remove that real estate agent from the transaction, you may very well be selling the house for less than what it's worth.
So Dave, as you know, the last couple of years, the market has just gone crazy.
I think that's the best way to characterize it, absolutely.
Yeah, and we've been in multiple offer situations. And what are you finding to be some of the challenges of buyers when they come to you and say, God, I just paid a significant amount over my list price for my property? What are some of those challenges and how are they kind of affecting people, today? What's some of the legal things that could happen in an environment like this?
I guess legally, you could find yourself in a situation where you've overpaid for the house and you're going to attempt to sell that house in 5 years and be unable to recoup those funds that you spent for the house. I personally think we're just in a market correction. I think the houses in Western New York have been undervalued for years. Yes, there are some people who have overpaid, that's absolutely true. But I think generally speaking, we've just seen an increase in values here that we're just not used to seeing. This is Western New York. We're usually used to the 2% a year, and we've seen more than that in the last 2 years. But I don't think it is going to revert. I don't think we've created a bubble.
Have you noticed clients frustrated when they sit down with you, even though they're excited to get the house, but at the same time they're like, I can't believe I just spent $50 or $60 or $100,000 more to get this house? How are they conveying their emotions to you?
And there's 2 schools of thoughts on that. You've got the sellers who feel like they've almost done a favor to the buyer by allowing you to purchase my home. And then you've got the buyers who think they've done a favor to the seller by potentially overpaying for the home. So everybody thinks they're doing a favor to everybody else, but the reality is it's an arm's length transaction. The values have gone up. Nobody is doing a favor to anybody else. It's contractual, it's transactional. I do find though that when you have that sense that I've overpaid for the house, you tend to ask for more. You want the house a little cleaner than it should have been. You want things to be a little bit better than they maybe would normally be in a transaction. And when you're a seller and you feel like you've done a favor to that buyer, well, now I can maybe leave behind all the garbage that was there because I've done a favor to them anyways. And the reality is we've got to pull everybody back to that contract that is the agreement between everybody. And it is the attorney's job to explain your obligations and your rights under that contract. And as the attorney, if you don't do that properly right at the beginning, and as the real estate agent, then you find that the transaction can be messy, especially towards the end. So our role is to make sure that everybody understands what their obligations are and understands what they're entitled to.
What advice would you give to buyers today when they're ready to select an attorney? What good advice can you give them to make that choice, knowing that that attorney is not just a transactional attorney, but could be a life partner for them down the road?
My practice is concentrated in real estate. That is 99% of my practice is real estate. Now, that's not to say that I've only done real estate. That's not true. I've been practicing 25 years. I've had extensive practices in bankruptcy and in criminal defense and in civil litigation. It's still important that that attorney be well-rounded, because simply doing a transaction is not enough to counsel you correctly. You must have intimate knowledge of other areas of the law. For instance, when someone is selling a home, I would advise them of the potential tax consequences to it. When I've got someone who's falling behind in the payments, I can counsel them on foreclosure and bankruptcy options. It's important to be well-rounded if you really want to give people proper advice.
Excellent. How can people get a hold of you to receive this awesome advice?
I prefer that people call me at the office. That is the best way to get a hold of me. We do offer free initial consultations, so if anyone is out there looking to potentially purchase a home in the future, absolutely give me a call. I will set you up in the right direction. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being with us today, man.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, buddy.